Good morning, everyone. So now that in our country we are into the second wave of this COVID pandemic, so we have few observations or concerns. So one of them is that are children getting more affected in this second wave? So for this, if you look into the data, this is from the this year, January 2021, when we were in the last legs of first wave, and we had around 11 million cases. And if you look at under 20 age group, we had roughly around 12% of the cases. Coming to a more recent data, which is from the second week of May this year, and we had just double of the case from this previous one, roughly around 23 million of total cases. And still, if we see at this age group, we have around less than 12%, 11.64% of children below 20-year age group. So because of this data, it's still we cannot say that children are getting more affected fraction wise, but still just to increase the overall volume, we are getting more children. But again, the important caveat is that the children get much less frequently tested than the adults. Second concern is that whether this COVID pneumonia is more common in the severe COVID-19 cases than the usually encountered multi-system inflammatory syndrome in childhood. But again, we do not have any definite data, and this getting more COVID pneumonia cases could just be a reflection of the overall increase in the pediatric cases, just due to increase in the sheer volume of the overall COVID-19 cases. So with these kind of limited data and warnings like such, we have to be much more careful and much more vigilant in the coming months. Now, some gross concepts regarding the clinical presentations and the pediatric COVID-19. So usually it's been observed and it's been documented that the clinical course and the spectrum is milder in children than the adults, and they have given few explanations for that, like the children have greater innate immunity due to more abundance of naive T cells. Secondly, due to the ongoing vaccination, the cross reactivity into the adaptive immune system is more, so that also is a kind of protective. And thirdly, we can look into this picture. This virus cells gains entry into the respiratory epithelial cells through this ACE2 receptor, and these receptors are less abundant in children, so this also is a kind of protective. A recent article in the Nature in December 2020, it put forward a very valid and very important factor, and that is the much better endothelial health in children than in the adults, due to the absence of the obvious risk factor which we commonly find in adults, like hypertension, diabetes, and smoking. So again, these looks more like a suggestions and hypothesis, and conclusive evidences are still not there. But these explanations look very convincing and logical. So now coming to the clinical presentations, how these children with COVID-19 may present to us. So these are two of the largest systematic reviews, and this was from the last year, and this is from recent one, this 2021 February. So the findings, the major findings between these two systematic reviews are basically the same, on the same lines. But I would like to highlight a very few points, like asymptomatic children were roughly around 15 to 20%. Fever and cough could be there in around 60% of the cases. Dyspnea is present in roughly around 10 to 20% of the cases. And then this rash, it has been observed that these rashes were much less frequently observed in the initial phase of this illness, but recently these are being much more commonly observed in combination with Kawasaki-like mucosal involvement signs and conjunctivitis. So apart from this uncommon presentation, we must be aware of some uncommon presentations with which a child may present to us. So these symptoms could be GI symptoms like pancreatitis, hepatitis, some severe symptoms, uncommon severe symptoms like myocarditis, pericarditis, causing heart failure and shock, some neurologic symptoms like encephalopathy and demyelinating disorders. Various kinds of rashes could be seen in a pediatric COVID-19 cases, and this peculiar COVID torch. It's nothing but the edema and duration around the toes in the periungular region and the skin overlying the dorsum of the phalanges. Apart from this, we should also be aware of the comorbidities, and these must be looked for in any child with COVID-19, because in the two large systematic reviews I just put it, the majority of the children who had either severe disease or mortality, they have one or more of these comorbidities, which Dr. L.K. Bharti also pointed out. So we have to be aware and we must inquire regarding that. So now coming to the management. So management has been defined by stage wise, like for mild, moderate, and severe stages of COVID-19 management. And then we have MISC, which will be dealt in the next section. So I will be basically dealing with moderate and severe illness and what the guidelines say. So we have many guidelines, but these three are the important guidelines which we look upon. This is the CDC guidelines, is the IAT guidelines, and this is the Government of India guidelines put forwarded by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So this Government of India guidelines has been followed very widely and a recent one. So I will be basically talking about this guideline, and whenever there is any difference of opinion from other guidelines, I will keep highlighting them along the way. So before coming to the management, some key points we have to remember that most children are asymptomatic or mild symptomatic, and Dr. Bharti said, and they just need home care. Out of symptomatic children, only 10 to 20% they fall into the moderate category and require hospital care, and even lesser, like 1 to 3% children, they have severe illness and may require ICU care. Mortality is very less, up to 0.2%, and presence of comorbidity must be looked for. And lastly, the guidelines, they are largely derived from the adult clinical trial data, as we do not have many good quality clinical trial data dedicated for children. So we really need very high quality studies in coming days to further improve upon these guidelines and recommendations. So coming to moderate illness. So in moderate illness, it can present with the usual COVID-19 symptoms like fever, persistent cough. Fever could be high grade, persistent cough. But the difference from the mild to moderate is the rapid respiratory rate, rapid breathing. So this rapid breathing is defined as for less than 2 months, it's more than 60 per minute, 2 to 12 months, more than 50 per minute, 1 to 5 years, more than 40 per minute, and for more than 5 years, more than 30 per minute. But provided oxygen saturation remains above 90. If it goes below 90, it would fall into the category of severe illness. So these children, moderate illness, they may have some degree of COVID pneumonia, but that may be clinically inapparent and may not really result into hypoxemia. So management-wise, these children should be admitted in COVID-19 ward with the proper monitoring in healthcare facility. Lab tests are usually not recommended by the various guidelines if child is stable and not having hypoxemia. But in the phase of hypoxemia, or if there are comorbid conditions, the lab tests like CBC, LFT, KFT, LDH, coagulation profile, including D-dimer, and some inflammatory markers like CRP, ferritin, procalcitonin, and chest X-ray, and CT scan as needed. It was dealt in the previous CGR. If there are any comorbid conditions, then pertaining to that, the required investigation should be done. Treatment-wise, again, it's largely supportive only, with encouragement of oral feeds. If oral intake is poor, then IV fluid therapy should be initiated, that we have to maintain fluid and electrolyte balance. Medication-wise, we have to give paracetamol, SOS, but for persistent fever, it can be given in this dose every 4 to 6 hours. Antibiotics, the guidelines say using antibiotics if there is evidence or strong suspicion of infection, like raised counts or persistent high-grade fever. In these cases, if oral amoxicillin or IV ceftriaxone can be added if oral intake is fine. For hypoxemia, that is defined as SpO2 below 94%, oxygen supplementation is required through nasal prongs or through face mask or high flow nasal cannula. it can be given. For corticosteroids, it may be administered in the presence of hypoxemia, or if a child has rapidly deteriorated. Like child was maintaining very well, and in a matter of 24 hours or 12 to 24 hours, child has deteriorated. Then corticosteroids are recommended. I will be talking in much detail about corticosteroids in further slides. And if there is any comorbid condition, this can be given. So this is largely Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India guidelines. So CDC guidelines say exactly the same. There is no difference. But the IAP guidelines, it has put forward some differences. Like for this state of hypoxemia, apart from oxygen, IV steroids, and antimicrobials, they have also suggested the use of remdesivir. But as a part of the general consensus guidelines, the other guidelines, including WHO, CDC, and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they do not recommend remdesivir for moderate illness. They recommend this only for the severe illness. I will talk in more detail about this later. So there is absolutely no role for hydroxychloroquine, antivirus, ivermectin, and this interferon B1 or plasma infusion. Sorry, dexamethasone is not here. All guidelines agree upon that these drugs are not. There is no role of these drugs. Azithromycin, we do not have any clear guidelines, but it has been used. But no guidelines, no recommendations due to lack of data and the potential side effect of QT prolongation. It must not be given if any baseline status or comorbid condition is not known, or if any cardiac comorbid condition is there. Some country-specific guidelines, they have put forward a rough kind of dosing regime, like 10 mg per kg on day 1 and then 5 mg per kg for next four days. But as a consensus, it's not required. Monitoring, we have to be very vigilant with red flag signs. Like we look in any kind of monitoring, like severe hypoxemia, lethargy, poor feeding, persistent high-grade fever, because persistent high-grade fever could point to any other infective possibility also. So now moving on to the severe illnesses and critical illnesses. So severe illnesses is nothing but a more severe lung disease and more severe COVID-19 with severe hypoxemia, that is SpO2 less than 90%, with increased respiratory effort in form of grunting and chest contractions, and some symptoms of more severe illness like lethargy, seizures, and somnolence. A step further, a further severe stage is called a critical disease, in which there is a development of ARDS, shock, multi-organ failure, or acute thromboembolic phenomenon, like PTE, or a combination of these. So that's defined as a critical illness. It's a even severe stage. So the guidelines wise, they have to be managed in the ICU or HDU ward. Investigation, we have to set all the routine and specific investigations, and the investigation should be monitored as per the clinical conditions every 24 to 48 hourly to see the improvement or the deterioration. Oxygen is needed. Definitely, oxygen is needed in this case. If we require low oxygen demand, then we can give to nasal prongs in like 1 to 5 liter per minute. If we need more, then we can give by face mask 5 to 10 liter per minute. And if needed, then if there is availability, we can give it to high frequency nasal cannula. But if the condition deteriorates and is not stable, then the CPAP or non-invasive ventilation or invasive ventilation will be required. Prone positioning is recommended, and it's encouraged. Apart from IV steroids and enoxaparin, antimicrobials, maybe IV ceftriaxone we can give in this case. Remdesivir has been suggested uniformly by all the guidelines in severe illness. A stage further, like ARDS and shock, these are even further deterioration. I will not go into much detail, but these are very severe and life-threatening condition, and a proper care of ARDS and shock, in form of proper mechanical ventilation with proper setting, like we keep low tidal volume and high peak, and then fluid management, proper fluid management with restrictions, keeping in mind that we should not precipitate heart failure or in volume overload. And for shock, the fluid therapy and the inotropic support should be given under proper monitoring and guidance. So one very important caution is IV fluid therapy, as I was discussing earlier. So there is a poor cardiac function or poor cardiac reserve due to COVID-19 or due to any other underlying comorbidity. So if we are not very judicious, then it can.
You will be wrapping up. Siddharth, you will be wrapping up now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So we have to be very careful and support for organ failure, and we have to look for any deterioration. We have to look for HLH and MIC. MIC will be dealt with in further sections. Now, very few more slides on some important medications for which there are some conflicts and difference of opinion. So universally agreed upon, there is no role for these medications. For dexamethasone, we give in the patients who are requiring oxygen and having requiring mechanical ventilation or oxygen. We use low dose corticosteroids in the dose of dexamethasone and the equivalent dose of prednisolone, methylprednisolone. Anything can be used, but dexamethasone is preferred. The WHO and IAP recommends same, but the guidelines from Ministry of Health, it recommends twice a day. So maybe we can start with once daily, and if condition is not stable, we can move on to twice daily. Enoxaparin, there is no clear guidelines, but IAP recommends like less than 2 months, slightly higher dose, and more than 2 months, the usual dose of 1 mg per kg every 2 hours. For remdesivir, it has been used. There's no optimal role, but USFDA has recommended it for more than 12 years. But actually, for emergency use authorization, it can be used for any age group more than 3.5 kg weight. The dose for more than 40 kg, the usual standard dose given in the adults. For lesser weight group category, we give 5 mg per kg on day 1, followed by 2.5 mg per kg for next 4 days. So all the guidelines have adopted the same thing. There is no rule and there is no sufficient data and no guidelines suggest the use of this tocilizumab IFN B1A and anti-SARS monoclonal antibody, and guidelines recommend against use of convalescent plasma. So to conclude, children are mostly asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. The severe illness could be in the form of severe COVID pneumonia with ARDS or shock, or in the form of MIC. Monitoring is very important. For various medications, there is lack of data, but with consensus, we can use corticosteroids in remdesivir. Tocilizumab and the other drugs have no clear recommendations, but in all cases, the case-based discussion, case-to-case based discussion and decision can be taken, and it should be considered as needed. Thank you.